goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sophia and Ava. It's beautiful. So we're talking about love. Author and psychologist Marianne Woodman once wrote, "We are living in an evolutionary time when world consciousness is struggling to move from a paradigm of power to a paradigm of love." When I read that, something in my heart just leapt. And I thought, well, that's it. That's exactly what's going on. I felt like dancing around the room. Things have felt pretty chaotic lately, haven't they? In the country, in some people's personal lives, quite a few actually, and even in this little town of ours with the hurricanes and the tornadoes, it's all been kind of unnerving. But if Woodman is correct, it's okay. It's really okay. Because what we are living through is a radical shift. We as individuals, as a community, as a nation, are waking up. What we are seeing is not particularly pretty at times, but we're not turning away. We're coming to terms with the evidence that a society built on power, materialism, manipulation, and greed cannot continue to evolve. We are looking for a new way. And I wonder if it could be that we're on the brink of discovering the power of love. This is pretty hard to imagine at times, especially when we're in the midst of crisis or conflict. But from a higher perspective, our struggles and difficulties could very well be signaling this paradigm shift, in the sense that they may be indicative of the painful death of an outworn worldview. The gap between our old way of seeing things and the as yet unclear new way is disconcerting. In his wonderful book, Finding Yourself in Transition, Robert Brummett calls this stage the void. And it feels right to me. The void, where the ground seems to be moving underneath our feet, and day after day our main task is regaining our center and finding our way forward one step at a time. But the void's an important part of transition. It's a time to revisit our values, relationships, and priorities, including our definition of prosperity. The younger among us seem to value friends, family, and community more than material success. In the void, our definition of power is called into question too. Our power over way of responding to issues does not seem to be working out so well. Could this be the moment when love begins to take dominion? Maybe. But we wonder, is love too soft to make a real difference in corporate boardrooms and international summit meetings? Maybe our definition of love needs to change too. It has become fairly confusing since these days it's as likely to be used to describe our relationship to chocolate cake as our feelings for our spouses and children. But what if we define love differently? What if we define it through our three main characteristics: respect, appreciation, compassion? Respect says, you can trust me to tell you the truth as I see it, but not force you to see it my way. Respect says, I honor your freedom, your autonomy, your way of life. It says, I will keep my promises to you. Respect says, my relationship with you is more important than the program, the problem, the task or the argument. Respect says, I see you and I hear you. Appreciation says, I see your value even when I disagree. Appreciation says, I'm grateful for the diverse perspective you bring to the table. Appreciation says, I do not take your goodwill or your service for granted. I value our interdependence. Compassion says, thank you for talking things out with me. It says, I see your pain and I truly care. Compassion says, I know you are doing the best you can. And it says, how can I help? Compassion says, we all make mistakes. It says, welcome home. It says, I know you're not perfect. Neither am I. But I love you anyway. Love is the great harmonizer, the universal language. It alone can build bridges. It's our common bond for every single man, woman, and child on this planet needs respect, appreciation, and compassion. Nothing but this kind of quality love has the power to transcend our differences, our selfishness, and our fears. It is the only way through the complexity of human relationships, as far as I can tell. And it reaches from the kitchen table to the UN. Love really is the answer. Is there any doubt in your mind that when people come together with respect, appreciation, and compassion for one another, that they will find a way through the problem, no matter what it is? If we are to make the paradigm shift that Woodman is talking about, the rogue individualist persona that has served us trailblazing Americans so well in the past must give way to a new idea, and that idea is interdependence. We need each other. We all need to give and receive love. Love of family, love of community, love of our partners, love of our profession, and love of our country. I can't remember who said this, but I never forgot it. Love is who we are being when we're in our right minds. Love is congruent with who we are at the core, at our best. I don't think there's a single sane person who is not more motivated by love than anything else. Protestant theologian Paul Tillich said, in every moment of genuine love, we are indwelling God, and God is indwelling us. Now I know there are still many people who believe that more money and power are the answers to every problem. Many still regard love as a high-minded, idealistic concept, a nice thought, but not particularly effective or practical. Many people still measure power in degrees of toughness, which I find very interesting, since my personal experience is that when I find myself acting tough, it's because inside I feel weak or uncertain or afraid. Yet many others are standing on the threshold of a new understanding that true power emanates from the heart. Why, think back just a month or so ago, during the aftermath of the great storms this fall, we saw love in action everywhere, all around us. Over and over again, we witnessed what love can do, yet somehow we still hesitate to trust its power, especially when we get afraid. Our first instinct, most of us anyway, is still to try to get power over the person or the situation we feel threatened by. But when the situation is truly overwhelming, we have to find another way to get by. For me, it was almost startling to come to the realization that there was a great blessing hidden in the destruction and loss we experienced and witnessed here. As difficult as it is for most of us to face our powerlessness, it is the doorway into the mystery we call God. Something holds us up. Something sustains us. Something gives us the instinct, which seems superhuman at times, to reach out to others even in the midst of our own troubles. Isn't that the power of love? What else could it be? And isn't it awesome? Only love is stronger than the barriers between us. You remember the Good Samaritan story, of course, when thieves ambushed a man on the road to Jerusalem, beating him up and robbing him of his clothes and money and leaving him for dead, which meant that they left him without an identity. Without his clothing or money or possessions, it was impossible to tell what class of society the man belonged to, or what religion he believed in, or what town he came from. First a priest and then a Levite passed by the man, probably on their way home from the temple. Surely religious men, yet with hearts as hard as stone. Ironically, it was religion that actually gave them justification for this hardness. According to Levitical law, one must never touch a bloody or dead bodies, or we ourselves may become unclean. So technically, the priest and the Levite were within their rights to pass the poor man by. Wow. Is this what being religious and law-abiding is supposed to look like? Then a Samaritan comes by. Jews and Samaritans were mortal enemies and had been for centuries. Jews had nothing but contempt for Samaritans, so Jesus' Jewish audience would have assumed that the villain in the story would be the Samaritan. But no. The Samaritan, the cultural and societal outcast, is the one who shows compassion for the beaten man. He picks that man up, who for all he knows could be a Jew or a Levite, and carries him to an inn and pays for his care. That story is so powerful. With it, Jesus gives us clear instruction that love is a greater mandate than law or religion. And love is more powerful than either. When faced with the reality of human suffering, love must win the day. The heart must become victorious over the ego or the intellect. We know that in our own families. Compassion must override prejudice. Now there is another meaning to the Good Samaritan story that may be less obvious. You see, the priest, the Levite, the Samaritan are all aspects of our consciousness. If we're honest, we can identify with all of them. We can also identify with the poor man who was attacked by thieves and left bleeding and broken. He represents the part of us that feels wounded. It represents the parts of us that we have not accepted. Don't each of us have aspects of character we would rather avoid looking at, or God forbid, admit to somebody else? I know I do. And haven't we all done something we feel is unforgivable? Anyway, I sure have. From the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. You have heard it said that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, I can't read this without crying. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If you love those who love you, what praise is there in that? Even the tax collectors do that. And if you accept only your family members, what more are you doing than anyone else? Do not the foreigners do the same? But I say to you, be perfect as God is perfect. Now, at first glance, it may seem that Jesus is talking about loving others, regardless of their belief system or lifestyle or even their behavior. But he is also telling us to love those parts of ourselves that persecute us, to befriend those aspects of our character and personality that we do not like. He says we are to be perfect, but being perfect is not about having no faults or flaws. Jesus is talking about wholeness. He is saying that to be whole, we must embrace all aspects of ourselves. He is so clear about it. He says that anyone can love the parts of him or herself that are strong and competent, or that look good and are approved of by others. But if these are the only parts of ourselves that we can love and accept, we will never be whole. Love is the only thing that has more power than pride or shame. Only love can give us the courage and humility to reach out for healing. And at the same time, love is the only thing that can heal us. When we cry out for help, the power of love responds. We can feel it. The beaten man in our story accepted help. He didn't wake up at the end and say, "Oh, let me out of here. Leave me alone. I'm too ashamed to be seen naked and bloody like this." It takes a lot of self-love to accept, to ask for and accept help. And it takes a lot of self-love to embrace ourselves when we have messed up or fallen short. There's an old Sufi saying that Susie reminded me of last week. The light shines brightest through the broken places. Somehow, this seems to be true. Just the other day, for whatever reason, I got myself into the feeling of being overwhelmed. I just didn't feel I could handle all that I had to do. To be honest, I was in tears and ashamed of the tears. Are you with me at all? But I'm blessed with the fact that I live with my best friend. And so I could tell him about it. I could allow myself to be seen in my snotty mess. And you know something? A peace came over me. A power. The sense of overwhelm passed. And in a short amount of time, clarity and confidence began to return. I know you've been in this place. I know you know what I mean. The power of love raised me up. Was it the power of my loved one? Was it the power of God? Was it the power of my own vulnerability? Yes. There's a very deep cultural dis-ease that has affected nearly every person on this planet. And it's a sense of inadequacy or unworthiness. There are 100 reasons why we have come to feel unworthy, and 1,000 ways we try to cover it up. We criticize ourselves one minute and deny our pain and shortcomings the next moment. What an inner conflict this sets up. I can feel the tension of it just talking about it. So doesn't it stand to reason that we will continue to go to war with other people, even those in our own household, as long as we're at war with ourselves? But Jesus calls us to reconciliation, to acceptance with respect and appreciation and compassion, to love both the friends and the enemies within. This is what it means to be whole, and this is the basis for personal and global peace. Yes, we're in the midst of a tremendous shift, personally and globally. And I choose to believe that we are moving from a paradigm of power to a paradigm of love. And yes, it does feel chaotic at times. Past ways of solving problems are way too primitive. And this is as it should be, because we are not the people we were once either. Our consciousness has evolved. Our awareness has been raised. We understand at a deeper, more spiritual level now, and so we can't get away with acting as though we have not grown and evolved. Of course, we can continue to try, and we do it, but it feels terrible every time. Door after door closes until we understand that love is the way. The world is slowly awakening like a big old bear waking from hibernation, stretching out its stiffness, lumbering out of its cave, only to find the landscape totally changed. The bear is completely disoriented. He stands still, trying to get his bearings. Which way to the food? Which way to the water? He searches his brain for a new idea. New knowledge is obviously needed, and new skills. How scary, how exciting. Maybe some of the other animals can help, even the ones we used to think of as enemies. I leave you this morning with my all-time favorite quotation from Teilhard de Chardin. You all know it. Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love, and then for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. It's so simple, really. I'll never forget the time after church when a woman who had not been here for a while came up to me and I said to her, "Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the service." And she said, "Oh, it was fine, but really, I came for the hugs." God bless you.